وصدق وبر وليسدس إذا ذكر العلماء فمالك للنجم. When the scholars are mentioned, Imam Malik is the star.
الحمد لله رب العالمين له الحمد الحسن والثناء الجميل وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له يقول الحق وهو يهدي السبيل وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to take in this lesson inshallah ta'ala, number one, شروط الصحة عند الإمام مالك في موطئه. What constitutes authenticity to Al-Imam Malik in this Muwatta, in this book of his? Okay? Al-Imam Malik, what are the conditions of authenticity to him in this Muwatta? It's important that we understand it. Because Malik has his way of looking at the hadith and what he grades to be authentic. Okay? And then the second thing that we're going to be taking inshallah ta'ala is the al-manhaj al-am. We're going to be taking the fiqh of al-Imam Malik rahimahullah. Al-Imam Malik, what's his fiqh based on? Okay, because we mentioned this book is not just a hadith book. What is it? It's a kitab which is a hadith al-ahkam. So we have to understand al-Imam Malik's understanding and his usul, his foundations that he bases his madhab on. So we're going to look at al-manhaj al-am li fiqh al-Imam Malik fi muwatta'ihi. The third thing inshallah ta'ala I hope today we take is we're going to take the narrators of the Muwatta. We're going to take the first person, and that is Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi rahimahullah ta'ala. We're going to take him and we're going to talk about the publications of that particular narration inshallah ta'ala. My aim is to make it all easy for you to understand. I will repeat myself. I'll ask you guys just in case you haven't understood me. So pay attention with me. There will be a lot of information, but that does not mean that you can't understand it. Inshallah ta'ala, with repetition and repeating myself, you will understand inshallah ta'ala. According to Al-Imam Malik, write this down. According to Al-Imam Malik, rahimahullah, the hadith which is sahih, according to him in his Muwatta, goes back to three things. Al-Imam Malik, this Muwatta of his, okay, when he selected this hadith to be in his Muwatta, he selected it to be sahih. He looked at it from three zawiyah, three directions, three angles, rahimahullah ta'ala. The first one is تحقق صدق الراوي فيما رواه. He makes sure that the narrator is truthful in what he narrates. The first thing that Malik looks at when he selects this hadith, and he looks at the narrators, the ruwat, the narrators that are in the Muwatta, the narrators that are in the hadith, Malik looks at and he verifies صدق الراوي فيما رواه, that he is truthful in what he narrates. So how would he look at it? He will look at its integrity, his adala. Malik will ponder on his adala. Does this man have integrity? Or does this narrator have integrity? He will also look at, for him, sidq, what falls under it is al-yaqadha, that the narrator is awake, he's alert. He's not an absent-minded individual. For him, it falls under sidq al-rawi. Because if the narrator was not awake and alert, he should let the people know that I am a person who's known to do a lot of mistakes. Also, in there, what falls under this category is ad-dabt. Ad-dabt means precision. All of this is in the first category. That this narrator is precise in what he's narrating. He has ad-dabt. Ad-dabt means he's precise in what he narrates. And last but not least, in that category will fall under adamul bid'ah. He's not an innovator. He's not a what? An innovator. So that's the first thing that Malik rahimahullah, he verifies and he checks. Number 2, تحقق عدم الالتباس والاشتباه على الراوي. The second thing that Malik will look at, rahimahullah, is this narrator, he does not mix certain things. So he's a person who's alert, but it could happen. And a human being, that particular narration, things get mistaken for him, or he gets it wrong, or things are confusing for him. So Malik makes sure adamul iltibas, that there is no confusion in that narration, and there's no ambiguity that this narrator has come with. Good. Third, and each one we're going to go through it properly, inshallah ta'ala. The third one is this narrator, whatever he's narrating, has to be in line with the reality, the truth. We'll see that later, what Malik means by that. تحقق مطابقة المروي لما هو واقع من الأمر. This thing, narration that the person is narrating, it should not go against the truth and the reality and how the matter is. It shouldn't go against it. So the first one, the truthful of the narrator, Malik will not take a liar's narration, so you won't find that in there. He will also not take the narration of somebody who forgets and confuses and has ghafla and heedlessness. Malik doesn't do that. The second two, if you ponder on it, what is it that Malik is looking at? I mentioned how many things that Malik look at when he takes the hadith to be sahih in his Muwatta. How many things did I mention? 3. If you look at the first one goes back to the Sina'a Hadithiyya. Malik is looking at it from the perspective of hadith. He's looking at it from the perspective of hadith. The last two categories, lakin, Malik is looking at it min haythul ma'na. Malik is looking at it in terms of meaning, rahimahullah. Malik accepts a hadith to be sahih not only because it meets the criteria of authenticity. That's not enough for him. And as we're going to see later, Usul madhhabi Malik is al-amalu bi madhhabi ahli al-Madinah. And so Malik believes if a narration goes against madhhabu ahli al-Madinah, and they all agree, ahli al-Madinah all agree on this matter, and a hadith goes against it, and that hadith is singular in narration, Malik will turn away from it and he will take the amalu ahli al-Madinah. He'll say this ijma'. Are we all together, brothers? And inshallah ta'ala later we're going to take that. So Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, he looks at these 3 points. The first one is from the angle of يعني صناعة حديثية. He looks at it in terms of the authentication of the chain and the narrator. The second two goes back to the meaning. Are we all together, brothers? Lakin after Malik, scholars sift through hadith even more. And they came with a more stronger and a rigid observation of a hadith which is rejected. And I think you should write this down. After Malik, the scholars realized that the hadith that is rejected of one of 2 reasons. Does anyone know? If a hadith is rejected and it's mardud, rejected, and it does not meet the criteria of authenticity, it's not met, it doesn't meet the level of sahih, is because of one of 2 reasons. As-saqtu fi sanad or at-ta'nu fi rawi. The chain is disconnected, or the narrator is criticized. There's no other reason why a hadith can be da'if or rejected. Either that there's a problem with the chain, there's this disconnection, or there is a criticism to the narrator. Are we all together? The criticism to the narrator happens in two ways: his memorization or his integrity. There's no third reason. His memory is not that good, or his adala, his integrity. Shall I repeat that again for you? Any hadith that you ever see that the scholars say da'if, mardud, not accepted, it's because of one of two reasons. Number one, there is a disconnection in the chain. There's a saqat fi sanad. There's a disconnection in the chain. That disconnection can be mursal, mu'dal, munqati', mu'allaq, the types of inqita' that we know. Are we all together, brothers? Or it's the narrator. There's a problem with the narrator now. And there's a criticism directed at one of the narrators in there. The criticism that is directed at the narrator is either his memory or what? Or his integrity. One of the two. His memory, it can be su'ul hifz, al-ghafla, and etc. And the ta'an of the rawi, the criticism that can be directed at his adala, can either be al-fisq, al-bid'ah, and etc. All of those are what? الطعن في الراوي من حيث العدالة, in terms of his integrity. Does that make sense? So scholars, mashallah, sharpened this more after Imam Malik. Like in في زمن Imam Malik rahimahullah, the science was evolving. That's why hence Malik rahimahullah, he accepts the narration which is disconnected partially, like the mursal, as we took last lesson, inshallah ta'ala. Before I move on, has everybody understood that? Or shall I repeat myself? Okay. Every hadith that's rejected, that's mardud, is rejected for one of two reasons. You're going to sometimes see scholars, they say, this hadith is da'if. You have to know straight away, I haven't looked into this hadith yet, but it's only one of two reasons why it could be da'if. It's either a disconnection in the chain, or there's a criticism at a particular narrator in the chain. Does that make sense? So if it's not disconnected, it's connected, but there is a criticism towards a narrator. The criticism, which is at-ta'nu fi rawi, the criticism to the narrator can be min haythu, from the angle of his dabt. His memory is bad. So they criticize him for his memory. They say, oh, he's got a problem with his memory. Or they critique him for his adala, his integrity. He's a kadhab, for example. He has fuhsh. He has fisq, sorry. Fuhshul ghalat is the dabt of the rawi. But he has fisq. Fisq means what? He either is consistent upon minor sins, or he falls into major sins. Or the integrity of the narrator can be innovator. But then they divide the innovator into two. An innovator, الذي يجهر ببدعته, he's out and about in his innovation, he makes it public and he hides it. If he hides it, his narration will be accepted. But if he's out and about mentioning and calling to his innovation, his narrations won't be accepted. Some scholars, they say, no, his narrations will be accepted only in the hadiths which do not support his innovation. Does that make sense? And there's a long discussion of the riwayah of a mubtadi'. Scholars have written books of it and discussion around it. Does that make sense? No. Adam al-shudud, shudud goes, what's shudud? Huh? So what hadith which is shad, a hadith which is criticized, what is that called? Scholars, they put shudud in غَيْرُ الْمَعْمُولِ بِهِ. the hadith which are like nasikh and mansukh. The hadith which is shad has met the criteria of authenticity. And the reason why you rejected it is because of its additional meaning that it has. The chain is connected and everything is accepted. But the hadith which is shad, a large number of scholars, they say it's actually not da'if, لكنه غير معمول به. Just like the mansukh is not da'if, lakin we don't act upon it. And some scholars, they say the shad, it falls under mukhalafa. And the mukhalafa comes from where? It goes from the dabt of the narrator. He did a mistake in his memorization in order to go through it. The first view I mentioned is the qawl of the usuliyin. The usuliyin do not believe shad is da'if, and they accept that. Amma a'immatul hadith, they believe shad is min aqsam al-da'if. Now we all together. Is min aqsam al-da'if. And they reject the shad. And the strongest opinion is that the shad is what? It's the criticism of the narrator in terms of his what? Memory. In terms of what he's memorized. Now, are we all together? Because this one narrator went against, for example, all of these people, meaning he's memorized it wrong. Okay? Everybody with me? So now we're going to go into Imam Malik's madhab. Brothers, I need you guys to be with me on this one. The Muwatta, because if you understand this, when we go into the Muwatta, we can take it and enjoy the hadiths and the benefits that we extract from it, inshallah ta'ala, okay? Okay, let's go to madhab of Imam Malik in terms of his fiqh. We're now going to look at Usul al-Madhab al-Maliki. Al-Imam Malik, he did not write his fiqh. He didn't say, my usul, my foundation, my principles I use to look at the Qur'an and the Sunnah is like this. He didn't say that. Does anyone know here the scholar who has written how he extracts from the Qur'an and the Sunnah and the way he does istinbatat and his usul? He's written a book on it. Does anyone know that Imam's name? Nobody's shouting out. I like people to put their hands up. Hiya? Al-Imam al-Shafi'i. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, from the four Imams, he is the only one who has written his madhab and his usul. He's written a kitab called Al-Risala, Al-Imam Shafi'i. And in there he illustrated how to extract rulings from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. He's written another kitab called Jumma'ul Ilm. He has another kitab called Butlan al-Istihsan, and etc. He has many books on Imam Shafi'i. And he has his big book, Al-Umm, that Imam Shafi'i wrote. Min riwayat Rabi' ibn Sulaiman al-Muradi, his student narrated from him. And in there's beautiful discussions on his views. So Imam Shafi'i, we know his usul directly from his own words. As for Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, and Al-Imam Malik, and Al-Imam Ahmad, their usul was extracted by their students. The students looked at the way that the Shaykh answered this question when he was asked, his fatawa. They looked at his usage of hadith in instance and situations. They looked at his books and what he's written, and from there they extracted the usul, the foundation, the method of the Imam. Does everyone understand what I said? Is that crystal clear? So who is the only Imam who has spoken about his madhab and how to extract rulings from the Qur'an and the Sunnah is who? From the four Imams. Huh? Al-Imam Shafi'i. What book did he do it in? Yeah? You find some in but there's a book which he authored on just how to extract rulings from the Qur'an and the Sunnah and how to extract and derive rulings from it. He's written a kitab on this whole issue, which later became called Usul al-Fiqh. The whole topic Usul al-Fiqh is how do you take from the Qur'an and the Sunnah, the rulings, how do you take it from it? Hey? Al-Risala. Who told him to write this book, Imam Shafi'i? Yeah? Who told Shafi'i? to write the Kitab al-Risala? Huh? Abdulrahman ibn Mahdi. Abdulrahman ibn Mahdi said to, Abdulrahman Mahdi is the teacher of Imam Shafi'i. I said to Shafi'i, write a book. In what? In how to extract rulings from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Are we all together, brothers? That's why the poet said, وَأَوَّلُ مَنْ أَلَّفَ فِي الْكُتُبِ مُحَمَّدْ بْنُ الشَّافِعِ الْمُطَّلِبِ وَغَيْرُهُ كَانَ لَهُ سَلِيقَةٌ مِثْلُ الَّذِي لِلْعُرْبِ مِنْ خَلِيقَةٍ. What does that mean? وَأَوَّلُ مَنْ أَلَّفَهُ فِي الْكُتُبِ. The first person who ever authored it as a book, as a science, was Imam Shafi'i. In what way, lakin? Does that mean no one knew how to extract the rulings from the Qur'an and the Sunnah before Imam Shafi'i? Is that what it means? No, the poet here is saying, وَأَوَّلُ مَنْ أَلَّفَهُ فِي الْكُتُبِ مُحَمَّدْ بْنُ الشَّافِعِ الْمُطَّلِبِ وَغَيْرُهُ كَانَ لَهُ سَلِيقَةٌ. Before Imam Shafi'i, it was saliqa. Saliqa means what? They naturally knew it. They knew it when they looked at the Qur'an and Sunnah. They knew how to extract rulings from it. Ali ibn Abi Talib and Umar radiyallahu anhu and Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She didn't need to be told, this nas is am, and this nas is khas, and this is mutlaq, and this is muqayyad, this is mujmal, this is mubayyan. She didn't need that, Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. As the poet said, لَسْتُ بِنَحْوِيٍّ يَلُوكُ لِسَانَهُ وَلَكِنِّي سَلِيقِيٌّ أَقُولُ فَأُعْرِبُ. What does he mean? لَسْتُ بِنَحْوِيٍّ. I haven't studied mubtada is marfu', khabar is marfu', maf'ulun bih is mansub. I never studied that. لَسْتُ بِنَحْوِيٍّ يَلُوكُ لِسَانَهُ. I am not a grammarian where my tongue has to follow the Arabic rulings. Here, when I talk, I get it right correctly. Because the Arabic language is innate, it's inside me. I can taste a mistake in grammar without knowing the rulings. That's how Usul al-Fiqh was for the Sahabas and the Tabi'een and the Atba'u Tabi'een. But after Shafi'i's time, people didn't know how to benefit from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Different types of people started to enter Islam. Their religion was mixing with different backgrounds. Sah? So then what they needed to do was, they needed to put principles to protect the understanding of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. That's why we say, brothers, studying Usul al-Fiqh will help us today in the 21st century a lot. Because people are trying to what? Say, let's reform Islam. Sah? You hear that a lot. Let's reform Islam. Let's reinterpret the text. Islam doesn't need that. We have a whole science called Usul al-Fiqh that does that for us. That protects our understanding. Are we all together, brothers? وَلِذَلِكَ a thorn in the necks of those who want to reform Islam or reinterpret the text, the thorn in their neck is Usul al-Fiqh. Mastering this science is protecting the religion. That's why Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he says, rahimahullah, the deen is nassul musaddaq wa bahthul muhaqqaq. That's the entire religion, he said. Nas musaddaq and bahth muhaqqaq, meaning an authentic text and a method and a way to extract the rulings from that authentic text. That's all. Is your dalil authentic? Yes, good. You met the first condition. Second condition is, did you extract the ruling from here correctly? Or did you not? Does that make sense, brothers? Nas musaddaq wa bahthun muhaqqaq. So Imam Shafi'i, coming back, he has written a book where he showed step by step how to look at the Qur'an, how to extract the ruling from it, how to use, if two texts, they seem to be going against each other, how to reconcile between the two. Shafi'i talks about it. And Imam Malik, did he do that? No. So then what they did was, the people looked at the students of Imam Malik and his students, they looked at the Muwatta, this book that we're going to study. They looked at it. They looked at the chapterings of Imam Malik and his hadiths. They looked at the statements that he says in there, and from there they brought his usul. Are we all together? There's also a letter that was exchanged between who? Al-Laythi ibn Sa'd and Imam Malik. A letter. And in there, again, Malik's madhab becomes clear. And but he's never said, this is what I use, and this is what I use, and this is what I use. It was never mentioned. But all of the four madhabs, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmed, all four of them, they agree on four sources. They agree on what? Four sources. These four sources to them is an evidence. Anything outside that, there is a dispute amongst them. The first one is the Qur'an. The Qur'an is an evidence to Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik, Shafi'i and Ahmed. None of them say the Qur'an is not an evidence. No. They all take the Qur'an as an evidence. One. Two. All of them, they take what? The Sunnah as an evidence. Are we all together? Lakin, how do they utilize the Sunnah? It's a discussion. It's another discussion. Al-Umum, they agree on it. Number three, they all agree on al-Qiyas, analogy. Four, al-Ijba', consensus. They agree on all of those. Generally, you should al-Qur'an, wal-Sunnah, wal-Ijba' wal-Qiyas. They all agree on those four. And this is called al-Usul al-Muttafaq alayh. This is the Usul, the evidences which are all agreed upon. Now, just because we said they agree on these four sources, it doesn't mean they use these four sources in the same way. Does that make sense? They might use qiyas in different ways, which they do, and etc. Lakin, this is what Imam Malik adds on. Malik adds on there, which the rest do not, is ijma'u ahli al-Madinah. The consensus of the people of Medina. This is a usul which is ziyada and extra to the madhab of Imam Malik. Ijma'u ahli al-Madinah. They all agree on it. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, he mentions, وَالْكَلَامُ إِنَّمَا هُوَ فِي إِجْمَاعِهِمْ فِي تِلْكَ الْأَعْصَارِ الْمُفَضَّلَةِ. Ibn Taymiyyah explains and says, and also before Imam al-Shatibi mentions it in his Kitab al-Muwafaqat. He mentions that when they say they take the consensus of the people of Medina, it's at the three golden generation, not now and not after that. Okay? وَأَمَّا بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ اتَّفَقَ النَّاسَ عَلَى أَنَّ إِجْمَاعَهُمْ لَيْسَ بِحُجَّةٍ. That's what he mentions. And just as a side benefit, if you want to understand the usul of Imam Malik's madhab, there's two books I encourage you to look at. Two books that will give you the understanding of the madhab of Imam Malik, his usul and his principles, if you want to understand it in more details. Number one, read the kitab written by Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi. It's called Al-Muwafaqat. Kitab al-Muwafaqat is basically written by a scholar of the Maliki madhab himself, and he speaks in great details about what? Usul al-Madhab al-Maliki. Another kitab that you should read, and it's very beneficial, is the kitab called Tartib al-Madarik. Tartib al-Madarik. And Tartib al-Madarik is written by Al-Qadi Iyad al-Yahsubi rahimahullah. Qadi Iyad al-Yahsubi, he's written it. In there he speaks about the madhab of Imam Malik and his usul and a lot about Imam Malik. Again, he's a Maliki in madhab. I repeat the two books. The first one is Al-Muwafaqat by Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi, and the second kitab is called Tartib al-Madarik. Tartib al-Madarik, and it's written by Qadi Iyad al-Yahsubi rahimahullah ta'ala. Also, the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi, Abu Abdullah al-Qurtubi, his tafsir book. Who can put their hand up now here and tell me what is unique about the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi? Have you all put your hand up if you've heard tafsir al-Qurtubi? You, mashallah, all of you have. So what's unique about tafsir Imam al-Qurtubi? الكتاب كلها مبنية على آيات الأحكام. The whole book, Tafsir al-Imam al-Qurtubi, focuses on ahkam only. The kitab is written by him, Qurtubi rahimahullah, for the reason of ayatul ahkam. Just the same way you have ahadithul ahkam, he's written on ayatul ahkam. This is why it's different from the tafsir of who? Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala. Brothers, you need to know this. When you look at a book, if somebody asks me a mas'ala on a hukum shar'i from an ayah, I will go to Qurtubi's tafsir. لأن the kitab of Imam al-Qurtubi is what? Lakin which madhab is Imam al-Qurtubi? He's a Maliki. So he speaks about it from which angle? From the madhab of Imam Malik. Also, Abu Abdullah, Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah, he has a what? Tafsir. In what? Tafsir ayatul ahkam. He's also a Maliki. And many other scholars have written books of tafsir on ayatul ahkam. Qurtubi's one is a giant, beast, rahimahullah, in when it comes to ayatul ahkam. It's a unique kitab, and I encourage you all to get it. Dara Alim al-Kutub, with the tahqiq of Abdullah Turki. His tahqiq is the one that you should rely on. Dar Alim al-Kutub, very beautiful book. What he does is he gets the ayah and he mentions how many masail are in that ayah. وَيَتَعَمَّقْ. Qurtubi will go in. He will get the different riwayat of the ayah, if it has different meanings. يعني آية مثلا قوله تعالى وقرن في بيوتكن ولا تبرجن تبرج الجاهلية الأولى وأقمنا الصلاة وآتينا الزكاة وأطعنا الله ورسوله. The ayah وقرن. And there's another way of reading it, which is what? What's the difference between وقرن وقرن? Qurtubi يتعمق. He goes into it. And he strengthens the meaning that they both go back to. And etc. Now we're all together, brothers. This kitab is what? When it comes to ahkam, you need to look at it. So it's another place to go back to if you want to understand Usul madhab al-Imam Malik rahimahullah, tafsir al-Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah. Tafsir al-Qurtubi. By the way, there's two Qurtubis, don't confuse them, by the way, just as a side benefit as well. There's two Qurtubis. There's Abu Abdullah al-Qurtubi, the Mufassir, who's written the tafsir and there's Abu al-Abbas al-Qurtubi, who's written a kitab al-Mufhim lima ashkala fi Sahih Muslim. He summarized Sahih Muslim and then he put a commentary on it. Okay? Abu al-Abbas al-Qurtubi is his name. They're two different men. That's why sometimes you hear قال القرطبي في كتاب المفهم لما أشكل في صحيح مسلم. That's Abu al-Abbas al-Qurtubi. And this one is Abu Abdullah al-Qurtubi. It's a teacher and a student relationship. That's another, inshallah ta'ala. From the madhab of Imam Malik rahimahullah, the usul of Imam Malik is also built on what is known as Saddu al-Dhara'i'. It's amazing. Saddu al-Dhara'i', as Imam Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi mentions in his Muwafaqat, Saddu al-Dhara'i' means to ban something because of what it's going to lead to. So this thing is it's not haram. Nothing's wrong with this thing. But it gets banned because it's going to lead to something. So it gets banned because of what it's going to lead to. But in and within itself, it's not banned. There's nothing wrong with it. But because it's going to lead to something, it gets prevented. Malikiyya, when it comes to Sadd al-Dhara'i', Malikiyya, when it comes to Sadd al-Dhara'i', they يتوسعون فيها, they go far in. And they'll ban something because of what it's gonna lead to. ولذلك the definition of what Sadd al-Dhara'i' is, I'm going to give you the kalam of Abu Abdullah al-Qurtubi in his tafsir, and I'm also going to give you al-Imam al-Qarafi. Al-Qarafi again is a great Maliki scholar, and he's got a kitab on al-Qawa'id al-Ahkam fi Masalih al-Anam. It gives you the understanding of the madhab of Imam Malik rahimahullah. He has a kitab, another kitab called Al-Furuq, where he talks about Al-Furuq al-Fiqhiyya. Al-Imam al-Qarafi rahimahullah. Abu Abdullah al-Qurtubi says, الذريعة عبارة عن أمر غير ممنوع لنفسه يخاف من ارتكابه الوقوع في ممنوع. So it's something that's not prohibited, but it's only prohibited because it's going to lead to something. I'll give an example. A man looks at a woman for marriage. Is he allowed to look at her? But outside marriage, what is he told? So, because outside, if he's not intending to get married to her, outside marriage, he's not allowed to look at her. But now that he wants to get married to her, he can look at her. The Sharia is looking at what it's going to lead to, because the look itself, in and within itself, is not prohibited. It's only prohibited because of what's going to lead to. Are we all together, brothers? Allah says, for example, another ayah, وَلَا تَصُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَصُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Do not insult those people, the disbelievers. Don't insult them. Don't ridicule them. Don't shame them. Why? Because this is going to lead to them insulting Allah and His Messenger. But insulting them in and within itself is not mamnu'. But because it's going to lead to this, it's what? It's stopped and it's prohibited. Are we all together, brothers? So the Sharia will ban things because of what it leads to. Even though that thing is what? It's not haram. But it's going to lead to something. Pay attention to this now. Malikiyah, they do that to so many things. They'll say, this is not allowed because it's going to lead to this. Stop it. It's haram. Like now, other madhahibs have become more on this issue of saddu dhara'i. And I feel like if you look at the fatawa, the mutaakhirin, the Hanabila today, have become more in saddu dhara'i than the Malikiyah. The current fatawa from the Hanabila is more in saddu dhara'i than I've seen in the Malikiyah. Also, from the Usul of the Malikiyah is another mas'ala known as al-Masalih al-Mursala. So from the Usul of the Malikiyah, it's called what? Al-Masalih al-Mursala. Masalih al-Mursala, I mentioned it previously. And I mentioned the fatwa of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. At the time of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, the ruler in fi nihari Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan, he had intimacy with one of his slaves. And then he freed a slave. And then he had another, again, the next day he had an intimacy with another slave. And he freed the slave. So Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi said, freeing the neck of a slave is meant to be a struggle for someone. That's why the Sharia put it there. You have to struggle and free a slave. But because this slave has because this ruler has so many slaves, he can, fi nahari Ramadan, he's going to do it and it's going to cause many problems. So what should it be? We're going to move from the first, because the first thing he has to do is fast, free a slave, right? And then after that, he has to do what? Fast. He said, for him, we're going to move on to the second. We're going to tell him to fast how many months? 2 consecutive months, right? That's a punishment for him. But the Sharia didn't do that. The Sharia organized it in this manner. But he's saying the maslahah is that he is told to fast 2 consecutive months because it's hard for him. And that's when he's going to feel it. And when he feels it, he's not going to do it. Is this allowed? Does that make sense? This is what the Malikiyah use. It's called Masalih al-Mursala. The Masalih is 3 types. There's a Masalih Mu'tabara, Masalih Mulghat, and then the third one which they believe, which is Masalih Mursala. Masalih Mu'tabara is the Masalih that the Sharia mentioned. Sharia mentioned this. And there's Masalih which is Mulghat. The Sharia ignored it and tossed it. It's Mulghat, rejected. For some people it might look like a maslahah, but the Sharia didn't give any consideration to that. Sah? And some people might come and say, but there's a benefit in it. Is غير معتبرة. Does that make sense? Example of that is alcohol. The ayah mentions Allah تبارك يسألونك عن الخمر والميسر قل فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. The Sharia did not give any consideration to what? The benefits that are in alcohol. Does that make sense? So this is a maslahah which is mulghat. The Malikiyah say, but there's a third type of maslahah that's not mu'tabara wala mulghat. It's mursala. It came about later. This is a dispute about this issue, and it's for another time, inshallah ta'ala. But this is from their madhab. From their madhab, usul al-madhab is mura'atul khilaf. They add it into their evidence to take into consideration difference of opinion. Okay? And that's another discussion for that. They also use another thing called al-istihsan. Al-istihsan. Okay? Istihsan in simple terms is when a mujtahid turns away from qiyas which is jali and he goes towards a qiyas which is khafi. He leaves a qiyas which is apparent and he goes to a qiyas which is very small. And this one which is the one Imam Shafi'i was very against. Shafi'i used to say, Man istahsana faqad sharra. Anyone who brings istihsan, he has legislated. أم لهم شركاء شرعوا لهم من الدين ما لم يأذن به الله. So Shafi'i was against it. Okay? This, my brothers and sisters, is the Usul al-Madhab al-Maliki. This is what their madhab is based on. Now I'm going to go into the Riwayatul Muwatta wa Ruwatuha. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to start the first one. But before I move on, is everybody with me? Yeah? The last usul is called al-istihsan. In the chapter of qiyas, there's a qiyas which is jaliyun and there's a qiyas which is khafi. I don't want to talk about it because I'm going to come to it later, inshallah ta'ala. A qiyas khafi is a hidden analogy. It's very hidden. Some usulina, they call it amrun juz'iyun. It's a subsidiary issue. You give precedence to the qiyas which is khafi, the hidden qiyas, over the what? The qiyas which is jali, the apparent qiyas. You give precedence to the qiyas which is khafiyun over a qiyas which is jali. Or in another term, as Ibn Arafah and others said, is taking amrun juz'iyun over a dalilun kulliyun. And we're going to talk about that inshallah ta'ala. I told you this one, and Imam Shafi'i was totally against it, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he didn't agree with this one. Now, I'm going to go into the Muwatta, this Muwatta that we have. This kitab Al-Muwatta, a lot of people narrated it from Imam Malik. Malik had a lot of students. And as you know, when Malik was writing this book, there was different stages of his life. As I mentioned to you, some of the scholars mentioned that he wrote it for 40 years. And there are some scholars who said he didn't write it for 40 years, and they have a long discussion regarding that. But if he was writing it for so many years, everyone's going to narrate it from him in different ways, right? Because Malik was taking out hadiths, he was putting this hadith in, he was sifting his book, he was working on it. It was a work. Sometimes he put this hadith before this hadith, and then sometimes he would omit, he would add, he would subtract, he would organize, he would give a different heading. So different people narrated it on different stages of his life. Does that make sense? The person who heard it from Imam Malik at his last stages, the year he passed away, heard it from Imam Malik, took it from him, is the version that we're going to be using. And it's the most common, and the most well-known narration is the riwayah of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. This is the one which is the one that we're going to be using. So let's talk about him and about his version of the Muwatta and a bit about why it's good and the best publication for it. Does everybody understand who Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi is? Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi is the student of Imam Malik who took this book from him, and many students took from him. Abu Mus'ab al-Zuhri, Abdullah ibn Maslamat al-Qa'nabi, Abu Isa ibn Ma'an, and many students, and Ibn Qasim and Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, many. We're going to talk about all of them inshallah ta'ala. But this is the one we're going to be using, which is Riwayah of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. His name is Yahya ibn Yahya ibn Kathir. His name is Waslas, and some scholars they say Waslasan. They add a noon to it. Ibn Shablal, Ibn Manqaya, Al-Masmudi, Al-Qurtubi, Abu Muhammad al-Laythi. So normally he's called Abu Muhammad Yahya ibn Yahya al-Masmudi al-Laythi. That's what he's known as, rahimahullah ta'ala. He, rahimahullah, he was born the year 152 Hijriya, and he died the year 233 Hijriya. And some scholars, they said, no, he died 234 Hijriya. Some say 233, and some say 234. Rahimahullahu ta'ala. The scholars, they praised him. When he took from Imam Malik, he came to Andalus. He took from Malik the Muwatta, he came to Andalus, and that's why Andalus became what? From predominantly Malikiya because of him. Single-handed, one man alone, but an entire madhab which everyone followed. So don't say I can't do something by myself. Are we all together, brothers? Yeah? Some people, they think, I'm alone, how can I do something? And sometimes people think if they're not known, they haven't done the work. Who said you haven't? Allah tells us in the Qur'an, وَرُسُلًا لَمْ نَقْصُصْهُمْ عَلَيْكَ. Messengers, we have not told you about their name. Does that mean those messengers didn't do their job? They are anonymous. We don't know who they are. But in the world that we're living today, everything you do, it should be on Instagram, sah? And Snapchat. And now TikTok. Sah? That's where it should be. Everything I do, it has to be known. But there's prophets and the messengers. Allah mentions they did things, they changed their nation from disbelief to belief, and Allah didn't name who they were. We don't know their name. وَرُسُلًا, and messengers. لَمْ نَقْصُصُمْ عَلَيْكَ, we did not tell you about who their names are. Sah? So he single-handedly, by himself, went to Andalus and he changed, brought this madhab to them. Ibn al-Faradi, look what he says. In his book, he's got Tarikh al-Ulama. He says, قَدِمَ الْأَندُلُس. He came to Andalus بِعِلْمٍ كَثِيرٍ. He came with a lot of knowledge. فعادت فتي الأندلس بعد عيسى بن دينار إلى رأيه وقوله. After Isa ibn Dinar, everyone came to Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. They came to him as a reference point. And one of the things that helped Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, look at this, that gave him that influence in Andalus, was he refused to take any political position. He avoided taking any position of power. And he became available for what? For the people. So when he became available for the people, and he was sitting with the people and educating the people, they really admired and they took a lot of knowledge from him, rahimahullahu ta'ala. Also, Ibn al-Faradi said, كان إمام وقته. He was the imam of his time. واحد بلده. Single-handedly one person. وكان رجلا عاقلا. He was known to be very smart, very clever man. أحمد بن خالد, he said, لم يعطى أحد من أهل العلم بالأندلس منذ دخلها الإسلام من الحظوة وعظم القدر وجلالة الذكر ما أعطيه يحيى بن يحيى وسمع منه مشايخ الأندلس في وقته. What he received, rahimahullah, when he came to Andalus, and the honor and the respect and the position he received and the name he got from it, no one would receive it like that. That being said, lakin, the scholars did mention he wasn't the most knowledgeable when it came to hadith. He wasn't big in the science of hadith. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Yes, he was a man who was reliable, and he did hear this hadith from Imam Malik, and he transmitted as he heard it, but that doesn't mean he was a person who had deep understanding of the hadiths. That's why Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah mentions that. He says, كان إمام أهل بلدي والمقتدى به فيهم والمنظور إليه والمعول عليه وكان ثقة عاقلا حسن الهدي والسمت كان يشبه في سمتي بسمت مالك بن أنس. He used to, because he sat with Imam Malik and he took from him, they said he used to be like Imam Malik, the way he carried himself, the way he spoke and the way he talked. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ بَصَرٌ بِالْحَدِيثِ. But he didn't have that what? That deep insight when it came to hadith. It wasn't all that in hadith. Al-Khalili, he mentions in his kitab al-Irshad, he said he's a thiqa, reliable individual. And Muhammad ibn al-Harith, he says, وَأَخْبَارُ يَحْيَى بْنُ يَحْيَى كَثِيرَةٌ غَزِيرَةٌ وَلَوْ ذَهَبْتُ إلى تقصيها واستيعابها لطال بها الكتاب. He said, Yahya ibn Yahya, he's a person of great honor and status. If I try to now mention his virtues and who he was and about him, he said this book will be big. So he was a beautiful person, an honorable individual. But there's something that I want you guys to see how reliable this man was and how honest he was. He heard the Muwatta from who? Imam Malik. But there were abwab in Kitab al-I'tikaf where he doubted whether he heard it from Malik, if he was there. Pay attention to this. Reliable people are reliable. You could just say, I heard it all from Malik. But what did he do? He said, these chapters, I don't know if I heard it from Imam Malik. I'm doubtful of it. So what did he do? He went to Ziyad ibn Abdulrahman and he took it from him, Ziyad ibn Abdulrahman ibn Shabatun. He sat with him and he took it from him directly. And at that time, who was alive? Imam Malik. So he took it. Again, that passion and desire for knowledge was there. So what he did was, he took it from Ziyad ibn Abdulrahman ibn Shabatun. He said, give me a narration of the Bab al-I'tikaf. And then he went to Malik. Because what was he scared of? That he travels to Malik, it takes a few months to get there. And then Malik passes away, and then he comes back and Ziyad ibn Abdulrahman passes away, and he didn't get the hadiths. So he went to Imam Malik rahimahullah to take these narrations from him, and he stayed with Malik rahimahullah until he passed away. And he was one of the people who prayed the Salatul Janazah on Imam Malik rahimahullah. The year Malik died was the year he read the Muwatta on him. So he took Muwatta from him in its entirety from Imam Malik rahimahullah rahmatan wasi'ah, which shows that his narration is the what? The last version of the Muwatta. Why did his Muwatta become big? What's so special about it? The fact that he was, he met Imam Malik the year Malik passed away, gives it that beautiful superiority, because it's al-arbatul akhira, the last version. Also, great scholars explained his one, which made the book even bigger, his riwayah bigger. Like Ibn Abdul Barr, he explained it in his At-Tamheed and in his Al-Istidhkar. In his Tamheed, he explains the marfu'at, and in the Istidhkar, he explains the mawqufat, and the athar al-sahaba, and the atba' al-tabi'in, and the maqtu'at. That's the difference between the Tamheed and the Istidhkar. The Tamheed focuses on the marfu'at. The Istidhkar focuses on the mawqufat and the maqtu'at. The fuqaha, sahaba and all of them, what they... Also, who explained it? Abu Walid al-Baji, rahimahullah. And Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, he has a kitab called Al-Qabas. He explained it. And inshallah we're going to talk about the rest of the other narrators who mentioned it, inshallah ta'ala. Who narrated this book from an Imam Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi? Who took it from him? Two people took it from him. The people that took from Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi are two people. The first person is his own son, Ubaydullah ibn Yahya al-Masmudi al-Laythi. His own son. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi's son. His name is Ubaydullah. Ubaydullah took it from his father, Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. And when his father passed away, what did he do? He made sure that he carried on teaching his father the book that he took from his father, and he kept teaching it and teaching and teaching it, and he sat down and he made sure it reached every corner of Andalus. So Yahya al-Laythi bought it, his son carried it on, and it spread even more. وَلِذَلِكَ the version that we have, inshaAllah ta'ala, the riwayah of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi is going to be through his son, Ubaydullah. And there's a reason why we choose that riwayah. The other riwayah is Muhammad ibn Waddah. Muhammad ibn Waddah, he also narrated this from who? From Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Like in Muhammad ibn Waddah, his version that he took from Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, we will avoid it. The reason is because Muhammad ibn Waddah, what he did was, he went after Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi on some of the riwayat, and he added extra wordings, as we're going to see inshallah ta'ala when we explain it. Muhammad ibn Waddah, he comes and he says Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi here, his own teacher, he says he's wrong here, and he corrects his teacher. And so this is not, whether your teacher is right or wrong, you should not tamper with the book. Because what will that do? You don't have the original version then. You have your corrected version. Does that make sense? And yes, we're going to see inshallah ta'ala, there were places that Muhammad ibn Waddah has corrected Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi is. And he was right. But that still doesn't give him the rights to what? Change the book. He should just point the mistake where he sees it to be wrong. Does that make sense? Like in his son, Ubaydullah ibn Yahya al-Laythi, he left his father's version without tampering with it, without touching it, and he kept it nice. And that's the one we're going to be using. Ubaydullah's version goes back to two sanad. It goes back to what? Ubaydullah, the son. His one goes to two sanad. The first sanad it goes back to is Abu Umar at-Talamankiyu. Abu Umar at-Talamankiyu. Abu Umar at-Talamankiyu is the sanad it goes through. Whose version are we talking about? Ubaydullah's one. Muhammad ibn Waddah, we're not gonna take that one. We're gonna take the son of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. His one goes, where does that chain go to? Abu Umar at-Talamankiyu is the version it goes back to. Okay? And the next one, which is the one we're going to be using, not Abu Umar at-Talamankiyu's one, we're going to be using Muhammad ibn Faraj. Muhammad ibn Faraj. And inshallah ta'ala, the first day we take the book, bi'idhnillah al-kareem, you're going to see that sanad, bi'idhnillah al-kareem. The sanad starts from, when we open the book, Muhammad ibn Faraj. Muhammad ibn Faraj's version, directly to who? Ubaydullah ibn Yahya al-Masmudi al-Laythi, from his father, Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Okay? That's in terms of the riwayah of Muwatta Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Now I'm going to go into quickly the copies of the book, and inshallah ta'ala bear with me, so that we finish today Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Next time week we can start somebody else, inshallah ta'ala. This copy now of the riwayah of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi is the best copy. The riwayah of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, the best copy out there right now, is the Manshurat al-Majlis al-Ilmi al-A'la in Morocco. Al-Maghrib, al-Manshurat al-Majlis al-Ilmi al-A'la. Their version is the best. This copy. You will find it as 2 volumes, this big. So this is 2 volumes. I'm old now, so my eyesight, I like it to be big. That's one. Or they've published the same one, okay, in 4 volumes. So my son has the 4 volumes one. He's young, he's got fresh eyes. So I give him the 4 volumes one. I took these 2 big ones, 2 volumes. Are we all together, brothers? This one is the best. I'm going to speak about the other previous ones that were authored and the mistakes that are in it. Okay? The first one is Muhammad Fuad Abdul Baqi's version. He did the tahqiq of the kitab, Muhammad Fuad Abdul Baqi. Fuad Muhammad Abdul Baqi's taba'ah is very bad because he did not rely on any makhtutat whatsoever. He did not use any makhtutat. He used 6 matbu'at that were published of the Muwatta, and he just used those. And what makes it even worse is that he doesn't even mention, is he using the sanad of Muhammad ibn Faraj, or is he using the sanad of Abu Amr at-Talamanki, or is he even using Ibn Waddah's version? He doesn't speak about any of that. Because Ubaydullah took it from his father Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, and so did Ibn Waddah, right? And we just mentioned Ibn Waddah changed it and tampered with it. Muhammad Fuad Abdul Baqi doesn't mention it. Rather, Muhammad Fuad Abdul Baqi sometimes does. He puts in tarjihat min indi nafsi, from his own self, that does not go according to the qawa'id al-muhaddithin. So his version is the lowest in the category. So don't buy that version. Then there's the taba'ah of Dr. Bashad Awad Ma'ruf. Dr. Bashad Awad Ma'ruf is very strong when it comes to tahqiqat al-kutub. Haqiqatan, He's very strong when it comes to books and the versions of books, and he's a master when it comes to manuscripts. But he's one also, it's got benefits in it. That's why I will be looking at his version, because what he does is he grades hadith at the bottom. So that's a miza, even though tasheeh and tad'if al-hadith is not his field. His field is tahqiqat. And there's a difference between tahqiq and takhrij. A person can be a muhaqqiq and he verifies the nas of the hadith for you, and he tells you this is what the narration says, and he's not his place to talk about the takhrij of a hadith. But either way, he does do takhrij of the hadith and he speaks about that. The benefits that are in it is that he does point out the awham and the akhta that Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi fell into in his version. He points those out, which is very good. Another thing that's good with his one is that the tertib, the sequence that he went with, Bashar Awad Ma'ruf, is according to the tertib of Al-Imam Abu Walid al-Baji's version and Al-Zurqani's version of the Sharah. But what he's criticized for is that he used, and he relied on, and he mentions it in the Muqaddimah, he used a nuskha wahida where he called it one version of the makhtuta he relied on, which he called it a nuskha qayyima, he called it. I have it here where he says about it. The version he used he uses the nuskha of Muhaddith ibn Masdi, who died in year 366. He goes back to it. And the tariq of that fara is to the 8th century. There's another version of Dr. Mustafa al-A'zami, Sheikh Mustafa al-A'zami, which was published by Al-Imarat, Abu Dhabi. They published his one. And he stood over, as he mentioned, 6 nusakh khatiyya. He says, I saw 6 manuscripts, and he said, I used them. But to be very frank and honest with you, the way that he benefited from those manuscripts goes against the manuscript itself if you go back to it. So if you get those 6 manuscripts that he mentions, that he uses, and you sit down and you look at it, the way that he benefited from it is not that strong. There are more than 56 mistakes that are in his version. And also Bashar Awad Ma'ruf's time, the tahqiq that he used was only one nuskha khatiyya. And that one nuskha khatiyya that he used, Bashar Awad Ma'ruf, he didn't benefit from it as you would expect from Bashar Awad Ma'ruf. And the excuse for him would be the time he was doing the tahqiq was the time the American invasion of Iraq was. And he was from Iraq, so that he was on the move. So he had to do the tahqiq in that manner. Wallahu a'la wa a'lam. So ala kullin, these men, this majlis is not one person, it's an entire committee. It's called Manshurat al-Majlis al-Ilmi al-A'la. This day today, okay? This tariq today, okay? This book is the best. 5 years later, Allahu A'lam. Or 10 years later. But what we have out there so far, I wouldn't waste my time or money on any other book other than the Manshurat al-Majlis al-Ilmi al-A'la. This is the only version I would advise you all to get. Bi-idhnillahi al-Kareem. Anything I've said that was wrong or incorrect is from me and shaitan, and Allah and His Messenger are both free from it. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.